Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a bookish podcast spanning genres and fandoms. I'm your host, Jason, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Tessa Gratton, author of the newest High Republic novel, Temptation of the Force. What is going on, my fandom friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. I am back on the mic, and High Republic fam, we are feasting right now. And I'm going to start off with something that might be a little bit unexpected, and that is talking about the ongoing comic books that are based in the High Republic from both Dark Horse and Marvel. Guys, I don't feel like I'm hearing enough chatter about these titles online. I know I talked with Daniel Jose Older last year and mentioned how much I love the High Republic Adventures line, and that continues to be so for this run of it. Recently, the latest issue of the Marvel run was just released in early June, and Cavan Scott is outdoing himself. And I know a lot of people wait to read these comics until the trade paperbacks are out, and I totally understand why people do that. But I feel like I am just over here reading this title and freaking out all by myself. I feel like I'm not hearing enough chatter about these things online. So High Republic friends, don't sleep on the comics. I know that you won't. I know eventually everyone will be catching up and reading them, but I have also heard of people who don't read them at all. And so I cannot say enough that the comics count. And if you skip something, you will miss something. I just got to throw it out there because Cavan Scott and Jim Tao, who's taking over art from Ario Anindito, is absolutely killing it. This latest issue that has Baron Bulin on the cover, I was just sitting there in disbelief reading it. It's crazy. And the way Cavan is mixing characters from different phases, I won't say much more than that, but it's like he has the craziest lineup of characters in this title, and I am loving it so much. So I cannot speak more highly of that title, and I cannot wait to potentially talk about it more and geek out with it with one of my friends on a future episode. But also, I cannot be talking about the High Republic without talking about the fact that The Acolyte is officially out in the world. It is out on Disney Plus now. The day that this episode gets released, the third episode will be hitting screens that evening. So Tuesdays is the new day to get hyped and to get excited about a new Acolyte episode. The week The Acolyte premiered was probably one of the busiest that I've had this whole year. Between it being the last week of school for my kids, my wife's job was also wrapping up for the year. We had class parties, there's teacher gifts, there's performances, award ceremonies, and on top of that, my full-time gig had a major launch event that was just literally taking all of my brain power and energy and just totally overtaking my entire team's energy. So all that to say, it's been very full on for me in my personal life. But of course, I carved out time to watch the first two episodes again, and I'm going to officially go on record to say that this show definitely lives up to the hype that I built up, at least for myself, but all the hype that has been literally years in the making since the show has been announced. It's the case of it finally happened. My expectations were high and they were met. This is a very rare moment, and I have trained myself to keep my expectations low, but I am so happy with what we've gotten so far. It is so fresh and so new, just like the High Republic Publishing Initiative. It can just be a starting off point for literally anyone. Like, you don't need to know anything about the High Republic, or even Star Wars for that matter, to jump in and enjoy it. If you kind of have a vague understanding of what the Force is and who Jedi are and, what a lightsaber is, you can jump in and enjoy the series. Add to this that the show has been so well received by critics, which, take it or leave it, but that's just kind of a nice affirming thing. And so many fans are just pouring out their love for it. And I just read recently that it's the highest viewed Disney Plus thing this entire year, with something like 4.8 million views in the first 24 hours, which is absolutely insane and is a testament to how many just awesome Star Wars fans are out there clamoring for content like this. I think we are living in a defining era for Star Wars, and I would even argue that we have been living in it since January of 2021 when the High Republic first kicked off. This is like one of the defining moments, I believe, in Star Wars history that we are living right now. And I've talked to some other people about this before, but just the fact that we get to experience it all technically from the start, like the High Republic is not over. And I really hope that it is never over. I hope it's one of those eras that just lives on forever and we continue to get stories from it. But it is such a great, fun time to be a Star Wars fan. And I feel maybe a change in the water with some of the online talk. I know there's lots of other voices out there in the Star Wars world that I don't even want to give them that much airtime, if I'm being completely honest, because my experience in the Star Wars community and in the book fandom has been nothing but positive and amazing. So I think that it is our time. It is our time to be excited about the content we are getting and to share it proudly and boldly, and to love it, and to ensure that whoever is wanting to dip their toe into the High Republic because they enjoyed the Acolyte, that they are being warmly welcomed. I have no doubt that that will be happening. I love when new people want to come in and join. This community has just been such a defining thing just for me in my own life, and I just know it's going to be a defining thing for Star Wars and for the fan community at large. Now, this is still This Dad Reads, and so I am still going to be releasing episodes once a month, and I will be discussing the Acolyte as much as I possibly can when I sit down to record. And I would say if you want a show or a podcast that dives deeply into each episode, talking about, specific either plot points or diving into lore or looking for Easter eggs, this is not going to be that type of show. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. That is not actually my strength. I'm not really good at those types of things. I would recommend some of my friends out there like Triad of the Force, Children of the Watch, Tarkin's Top Shelf, and even like Star Wars Explained on YouTube. There are tons of amazing Star Wars content creators out there making awesome content that I just want to hype them up and share it. If you're looking for an Acolyte show that dives into things like that, I definitely recommend something like those. There's tons of other ones out there too. So if I didn't mean to leave you out. Those are just the ones that are at the top of mind right now. But they are out there in the online space. They're definitely easy to find. And so I would definitely recommend one of those. Now, once the Acolyte is over, the full 8-episode series has come to its conclusion, I will definitely be having a geek out session on the show. I feel like sometimes after I've read a really good book or had a really epic movie-going experience, it's just that cathartic experience of talking about it with someone, right? So I want to have someone on the show that we can talk about the Acolyte talk about the things we loved, the connections we might have caught, maybe ones that I didn't catch. So definitely looking forward to doing that in the future. So for right now, I want to make my opinion about the show crystal clear. I absolutely love it. I also wrote a written review on thisdadreads.com about the show, which you can go and check out. But I just want to say that I think what Leslie Headland has done here, the cast she's put together, the writers she's assembled, the production quality, it's all top notch and just incredibly cool. I cannot wait to see how this season plays out. And it's amazing to just see a great story set in the Star Wars universe play out on screen like this. I kind of mentioned this in my written review, but I feel like this is kind of a story that we've gotten really only in publishing and comics. Like, it's just a mystery story set in Star Wars. And so I feel like it's so unique in that regard. And it's basically untethered from anything that's existed before. Yes, it's in the High Republic era, and it's connected to that in subtle and sometimes creative ways. Maybe we'll see it even more greatly connected to it as the series unfolds. But for the most part, it's kind of existing in its own space, so it can kind of do whatever it wants. I could just go on, and I guess I can. It's my show. But I definitely want to keep talking about other things in the High Republic that are happening that are keeping us fed right now. And one of those things being Temptation of the Force by Tessa Gratton. That book, the second adult novel in Phase 3 of the High Republic, is out everywhere today, the day that this episode drops. And I am so happy that I was able to have author Tessa Gratton as a guest for the very first time. And we had a spoiler-free discussion about the book and so much more. But before I get to that, I want to share my thoughts about the book itself. But first, I think I need to get my droid buddy in here to help me. KC78, are you around? Hey, there you are. Hey, I missed you last month. The schedule was so crazy. I wasn't able to get you charged and ready for my recording session, but we are reunited, my friend, and it feels so good. Yes, Casey, I know that you know how much I enjoyed Temptation of the Force, but my friends, my listeners don't. So I wanted you to be here in the room with me to help remind me of all the things that we've already geeked out about, and maybe you can remind me things that I forget to talk about as I'm just sitting here rambling, talking. Is that cool with you? Okay, awesome. Thanks. So I have my full written review of Temptation of the Force up on thisdadreads.com right now, but I want to share my raw, unfiltered thoughts with you here right now. So friends, I think that we have on our hands one of my all-time favorite High Republic novels of all time. And that's a bold statement, I know, but I feel like at least on my first reading, I did not want to put this book down. I loved it so much. It is honestly that good. Tessa Gratton's writing, I've only read her in YA and in middle grade. Obviously, she wrote Quest for Planet X from Phase 2, and she was the co-author of both Path of Deceit and Defy the Storm. And she has a number of YA books that she's published outside of Star Wars, so she's very well versed in that space. But Temptation of the Force is just something different altogether, and it feels like to me, from the little that I've read of her, that it's kind of a level up in her writing. And the writing, the prose, there's passages in here that I just like soaked in. And I'm like a word person, right? Like I was an English major. I love reading. I love books. This is a novel that literature folks, book folks, word people are going to sink their teeth into and be so emotional about. Her writing is so vivid, and it just strikes very strong imagery. The imagery in this book is probably some of the strongest I've read in a written work that's not a comic book. Like, I literally had visions of the scenes popping up into my mind, and I actually have one that I want to try to create myself or maybe commission something. I have a really strong image that involves the villain and someone else he interacts with in the novel that I just was like, oh, I want art of this. Also, she handles all of the multiple plot lines and POVs so well. It gave me vibes of Cataclysm by Lydia King from Phase 2, who I also thought handled the multiple plot lines very, very well. Tessa especially just like kept me engaged with, no matter who we were with at the moment, I was engaged with it. Obviously, there's people and characters in this book that we all love, and the Avar Elzar situation, which I'll get to in a second, is very, very exciting and enticing. But there's also people like Buryaga and Bell and Markion and Girastaros, and there's just so many things going on at once, which sometimes can feel overwhelming at times, but the way that she treats it and handles it, it's just all great. Like I didn't find myself wishing that we could skip this part and get back to something else. And like I said before, I'm going to say the strongest element to this book is the Avar Elzar relationship, romance, whatever you want to call it. But I don't think it was good in that regard for reasons that we were all expecting. And I talked to Tessa about this in our interview, and I want to tread lightly because to me this is a spoiler. This is basically the heart of the book that I don't want to give away. But all I'll say is that she handles this relationship and this situation with so much care, and it's grounded in reality in a way that I wasn't expecting. That is honestly beautiful. That's the only word I can think of. It's beautiful. And I found myself almost tearing up at points, which I don't typically do, but the way that she handles it and explains things is just out of this world. Honestly, I was blown away. I can't even think of any other positive way to say that, but that. We also, like I said, Buryaga has some real highlights in this novel. He has always been a favorite of mine, but he gets some attention and character development things that just take him up another level. I also mentioned Markion Rowe. I think a lot of us were kind of like questioning Markion's place in all of this after the Eye of Darkness because he felt kind of lost. And I think, especially towards the end of the book, we will see that the Markion that we had known from Phase 1 is possibly coming back. The journey he goes on, which involves some psychological elements and let's just say the Evereni who see ghosts sometimes, he experiences that in this book, and I was very happy. I'll just say that. But he is also kind of on this exploratory journey trying to figure out what's going on with the blight, trying to figure out how that affects the nameless and how he can use that to his advantage. And that is a huge jumping off point to racing towards the end of this novel and literally leaving us wanting more by the time this novel ends. Oh, Casey, that was a lot. Did I miss anything? Okay, good. I didn't think so. I think I mentioned everything. The cliffhanger ending, Belle and Burry, Markion, all that stuff, Avar Elzar. I'm sure there's stuff that I'm missing, but I don't want to give too much away, so I can't spoil it. Like, I want people to experience it for themselves, of course. Okay, well, thanks for joining me for that, my man. So Casey and I are going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll be joined by Temptation of the Forces author Tessa Gratton herself. This dad has support today from Heroes and Villains. Now, for all my collectors out there, Heroes and Villains offers the most amazing wearable and lifestyle items for people of all genders from all types of fandoms. Heroes and Villains has officially licensed merchandise from Marvel, DC, Dungeons & Dragons, of course Star Wars, and many more. What I love most about Heroes and Villains is that you can be as bold or as subtle in your fandom expression as you want to be. They've got everything from graphic tees, to patterned tops, to jackets, to crossbody bags, to wallets. And yes, my High Republic fam, they've got stuff for us too. And they are constantly adding new stuff to their lineup. So if you need to refresh your summer wardrobe, I've got you. Use code ThisDadReads at heroesvillains.com and save 20% off your first order. And guys, this code is stackable, so you can use this on top of any featured sale or clearance items as well. That's code ThisDadReads at heroesvillains.com for 20% off your first order. Definitely check it out. That's heroesvillains.com using code ThisDadReads. And we are back. KC78 and I would like everyone, wherever you're listening, to help give a warm TDR welcome to author of Temptation of the Force, Tessa Gratton. Welcome to the show, Tessa. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you on for the first time. I'm kind of checking off my High Republic author, card. Yeah. But this isn't the first time we met because we recently ran into each other at the premiere of The Acolyte the other week. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, we sure did. It was really a whirlwind and so exciting. We didn't get our invitations until like 9 days beforehand. I think that's how it was for pretty much everyone. And so it was just like getting there was so wild in and of itself, and making sure we all had what we wanted to wear and things like that. But then once we were there, it just like everything sort of in a weird way, I felt really, really calm all of a sudden. I was just like, oh wow, here it is. This is really happening. I just am gonna like smile constantly and have a great time and look at everything. It was just fantastic.
I can't agree more. I can imagine how surreal it must have felt for you guys, let alone everyone else who was in attendance. It was my first thing like that too. So just trying to soak everything in, and because who knows if this opportunity will ever come for me like this. So, I mean, it was definitely once in a lifetime, and running into all of you guys, feel like I was at the right place at the right time when all of you, the publishing folks, walked up. So I was like, oh, my people, I felt more at ease, honestly, seeing you guys there, like, because obviously I've met some of you, but I'm like, okay, these are my book people. I need to.
Yep, we can all stand together.
Yes, exactly.
Safety in numbers.
Exactly. Well, That's awesome. I'm so glad. Again, I am glad. And I've heard other creators say they were so glad that you guys were there and a part of that experience, because it wouldn't have been, I would have felt weird being there without, like, at least knowing that you guys had been extended the invitation, but like, it was so nice seeing so many of you there. So.
Yeah, we were all really excited. It was, it's too bad that we couldn't get George and Cav and Justina there, but it was, last minute and far away. So
yes, 100%.
But it was almost all of us, which was really fantastic.
Yes, definitely. Well, let's jump into the reason why we are here today, because Temptation of the Force is out in the world today. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I am really relieved and excited that it's out.
I can imagine. Well, first of all, before I get into my questions, I have to say, that this is going down, Tessa, as one of my favorite High Republic novels of all of them. So whatever this, take it or leave it, but congratulations. Like, I was blown away by this book, and I told you as much on the carpet, and I tried not to like freak out to you in person because I had literally just finished it like days before. So,
thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. I think this book is going to blow people away for reasons that they probably aren't expecting. And you said as much before. So I am curious to know that what did your research look like as you prepared to write this book? Like, obviously, I'm sure you've been keeping up with everything that was going on, but did you need to kind of go back and do some catching up, as it were, just to make sure that you were like tracking with where everyone is at this period in the timeline?
I really did. When I was brought on to Project Luminous, the phase one had already been completely written, and most of it was out already. I even think maybe just the last couple hadn't come out. And so I really quickly like got all the books initially, like the books, and they gave me access to like the comics and things like that. And I read everything as fast as possible initially, and was definitely just like being overwhelmed with all of the information. But I wasn't too worried about tracking like character arcs and things like that, because I was right. The first book I wrote was Path of Deceit with Justina. And of course, that was going all the way back and was the beginning of phase two. So I didn't really have to worry about, okay, where's Avar and what's the name of that ship that she likes? Like those kind of things. I didn't have to really remember until we were coming back to work on phase three. And I did get particularly, I think I only reread the adult novels from phase one, but I did it with like sticky notes and like underlining and things like that. So I was really trying to pay attention to the characters I knew that I was going to use primarily, so that I really just, I love these characters so much, and they were created by other people, my peers now. But I wanted to like do them justice and find ways to develop them further, but from the, really incredible and sometimes very complicated base that they were given in phase one. And so I reread several things over and over again and just really worked on, trying to, I guess my homework was really figuring out their emotional arc for everyone, where they had gotten to at a certain point. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to ask another question so badly right now, but this is a spoiler-free episode. Maybe we can talk about it after our session's done. But well, you mentioned that this was you had written your first work with Justina, obviously Path of Deceit, which again, another standout, which I know is a lot of people's top YA from the High Republic. One of my favorites, focuses on my girl Marta. Anyway, amazing book. This was the first one that you'd written fully on your own. So what was that experience like? How was that different from the co-write?
I wrote a middle grade on my own for phase two, also the Quest for Planet X. But this one was very different even from that. And in a lot of ways, it did feel like it was my first, partly because of just the scope of it. It's something like book 19 in a 22 book series, essentially, as opposed to the previous books that I was working on for phase two that very much felt more like beginning. And, the characters in Quest for Planet X had only been in one book before that George wrote. And so I really only had to like work with him on that, which is wonderful. I love writing sequels for George. But when it came to Temptation, I, of course, felt a lot of pressure, not only because of the characters and the things that they needed to go through, and some of the reveals that were going to happen, and where everything was leading, and like just finding the right way to even think about the story when I was trying, okay, like how do I even structure this? I know this needs to happen and this needs to happen, but like how should I weave them together? That kind of thing. And I could have like asked other people, but with Path of Deceit and Defy the Storm, Justina is really, really good at structure and pacing and like story beats. So I basically didn't have to think about that part, because Justine would just be like this, then this, then this, then this. And I'd be like, oh, that's perfect. But with this one, it was like all me. I really needed to untangle the narrative and like the way I was imagining it. So I think that was the biggest difference is I had to figure it out by myself.
Thank you.
Sure,
Sorry,
sure.
go ahead.
Well, it's just, I've written a lot of books by myself before I worked for Star Wars,
Sure.
but it was still very different because, working on by yourself when it's your own world and your own characters versus working on writing something, creating it essentially by yourself while it's also being co-created by 12 other people is just very strange and challenging, but it also makes it so dynamic, like the process.
Sure, I bet. And I apologize. I didn't mean to, leave out Quest for Planet X.
Oh no.
It was more just trying. I knew this was the first adult novel, so you answered exactly what I meant. I'm sorry. I knew that.
Great.
And this next question kind of relates to that because obviously this is a sprawling story with like multiple characters and settings. And like you said, the scale of this book is just, very different. And I feel like the scale for the adult novels is a little bit different, right? So was that something that, you mentioned it a little bit. Did it lean more towards the exciting for you or the intimidating, or like kind of where did you land on just the scope and scale of this book?
Oh, when I was first conceptualizing it, when, it was first offered to me to be able to write this one, I instantly said yes, because that's what you do. But also I was really excited to get to sink my teeth into one of the adult novels. But like I very quickly became quite like trepidatious and like not quite anxious, but
what have I done?
Some days I would just be like, oh, right, what have I done? I've got a bad feeling about this. But that was partly because my home in like writing has been young adult. That's where I have written a couple of adult fantasy novels on my own, but for the most part, I write YA, and that's how I got into professional writing. And so I really am very comfortable in YA spaces. And so that wasn't, with working on Path of Deceit and Defy the Storm, and to a lesser extent, Quest for Planet X, I was, just like, well, I know how to do this. I just have to figure out how to do it in a Star Wars way. But with the adult books, I was like, oh, this is what, I read every Star Wars book that was published until like the late 90s when I was a kid and a teenager. And I was just like, oh, for some reason, this feels so much more real and stressful. And like I have to live up to something. And I think that is because it felt like I was supposed to be writing something that was as effective and evocative as one of the movies, which never really occurred to me with the YA, probably because of my comfort level in YA. But with Temptation, I was just like, oh God, this is a Star Wars movie that I have to put into a book. So it was, I was nervous a lot more than I was not nervous.
I can imagine. Well, This next question really leans into part of what I wanted to ask earlier when you mentioned the emotional beats, but I would just say, from my opinion, is that you have a real gift for expressing human emotions on the page, and there's definitely no shortage of that in Temptation of the Force. Were there characters or pairings that you enjoyed writing more than others, or kind of story beats that you kind of gravitated towards?
I was most invested in like coming into this
Mhm.
in I really just wanted to nail Avar and Elzar and their relationship. And the first, once I had like the story beats and that things actually have to happen,
Yes.
then I got to start really thinking about, okay, well, what their emotional states and how are they going to relate to each other. And I started, I do a lot of my work away from my computer and notebook because I go on long walks
Mm.
and really am thinking about character and relationship is my favorite thing to write about at all, in any book, all kinds of relationships, especially complicated messy ones. And so I would just like be walking around, and I would just think of like dialogue. Okay, this is something that I think Avar needs to express. This is something that Elzar needs to express, like that kind of thing. And I would send myself these really long voice memos and things like that so that when I got back, I would remember the dialogue. But that was a really, it was just a really nice, and it was very satisfying for me to work on their communication and how they relate to each other. So I think that unsurprisingly probably was my favorite. And I remember when I was writing one chapter, which is one of the Avar and Elzar conversations. Um, and after I wrote it, I was like, wow, I have to rewrite this and rewrite this again. And I wrote this one chapter over again, like 5 days in a row, just like nuancing it and
Mm.
trying to like get it exactly right. And I was really like, it was my first draft. I normally am not that like picky about getting something exactly right on the first draft, but I just had this feeling that if I could nail this scene, everything else would
Mm.
fall into place. And when I turned it in, um, my editor, after he read it, he emailed me and he was like, "This scene is the heart of this book." And he knew exactly what scene. I hadn't told him that story, and then he goes, "So now you have to earn it because the rest of the book you're not earning it yet." So
Oh.
that was like the way that we did the revision, was with an eye to just earn that one scene.
Mm.
I think it's probably pretty, I think people will be able to figure out which scene it is.
I'm pretty sure I know exactly which scene you're talking about. And I was earmarking, and this is probably I'm not a huge highlighter or like annotator person when I read, but I also read this book earlier than I usually do because I was so excited. Like I really have to time out my reading schedules because I don't want to forget about what happens by release date.
Sure.
But I couldn't wait. And this is the most highlights I've ever done in a Star Wars book, Tessa. Like there are
Wow.
beautiful passages like that I was like I almost cried at one point, and like I don't do that either. So like I cannot like thank you enough for like the beautiful way that you expressed so many emotional aspects to like the human condition, and not even just like Jedi. It was so great, and I'd never read something in a Star Wars book that said it quite the way you said it, and the way it's written is so beautiful. And it's not just the fact that there's emotions coming out, it's like the how, like it's the language and the words you chose, and like I saw it, like it was so evocative visually. the way you explaining that now, like going on a walk and visualizing the scene, like that translates so strong. So I'm just like, I'm just talking now. Like, it was so good. And like, that's the part I don't think people are ready for. Like the way that it's probably going to affect them like deeply. And not just on like a surface level, like people wanting certain things to happen between Ava and Elzar. But anyway.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
You are very welcome. And I was DMing some of my other, advanced reader friends saying like, have you got to what chapter are you on? Because to me, there's definite marks and beats, like probably a quarter of the way in, maybe halfway in, there's a chapter that to me was really like, oh, we're good. Things are happening. So anyway, I was tracking, like, I'm on this chapter. I'm okay. They haven't read that part yet. So good. So since you got to touch on so many different characters in this book, did you become like a bigger fan of any of the other kind of side plot, other characters along the way after you got to spend more time with them?
I did. And it was a little bit unexpected for me because I've never particularly, this is a weird thing to say as a lifelong Star Wars fan, but I've never particularly cared about Wookiees.
You heard it here
they're
first,
fine.
folks. Okay.
They're fine. But I, as a child, was like, they're just really tall Ewoks. Let's go back to the Ewoks. But so when I was in the development process, I decided early on I wanted to use Burryaga's point of view instead of Belle's, partly because everybody else had used Belle. And I was like, well, I'm going to be different. This is one way I can be different. But also, I really wanted the actual point of view of the, sort of empath character because of what was going to happen. That I absolutely can't say anything else about because it's all spoilers. But so I needed the empath point of view. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write from Burryaga's point of view. And I really enjoyed it. Just, rereading his scenes, the story, the Burry and Belle story in
Tales of
Light and Life. I reread that like a couple of times. I was just like, oh my God, this poor baby.
Yes.
I'm gonna make it worse. I'm so sorry. But I got to know Burry. It was just a nice revelation, both, about the character itself and thinking about, my opinions about like Wookiee in the galaxy and Wookiee Jedi and things like that. And so that was really good for me as a writer and a fan. And also I think it made it easier to make some of the revelations that Burry has and the things he experiences. I hope they feel more authentic because I was also kind of experiencing this revelation of, my new relationship with Burryaga. So definitely him. I love him. He is precious and should be wrapped up in blankets and taken care of for the rest of his life.
Well, as you were answering that question, I was just thinking, I was envisioning Burry like giving you a big hug. Like he can wrap you in his like big Wookiee arms, right? Like everybody just wants to hug him. And I feel like even after this book, it'll be even more so. Yeah. Yeah, I won't say anything else. So what are you most excited for readers to experience with this book?
Oh, probably, gosh, there's just so much. Every time I think, oh, well, it's this. Oh, but what about this? I I guess really the emotional core of it really at the end of the day is what, okay, I know what it is. It is the examination of Jedi and love and attachments because this is really my opinion Um, people who've read Path of Deceit won't be surprised that I have a lot of opinions about how the Jedi use the Force and, the way that it is, both good and bad, and the way that they, um, as a body, like a structure, a governing body, like the Jedi Council, and it's very much a political entity. The Jedi Order is, particularly at this time during the High Republic, and the way they control much of how the Jedi are allowed to think and feel is actually bad. I mean, obviously, it plays out very badly in the long run on all kinds of levels. And so when I was challenged to write a Jedi love story, which is how this was always presented to me, was that's what this book, before it had a title, book two, adult book 2 of phase 3 is the Jedi love story. And so it's like, well, oof, that's going to be hard because Jedi aren't allowed to love. And so I really am very happy with where I got the Jedi, and not just Avar and Elzar, because there's a lot of different conversations about love and emotions. And I really am excited for people to basically read my opinion about why Jedi should be allowed to love. And I hope it is fun and satisfying. And also, I love to argue. So come argue with me.
Well, I don't know if I'm the person for that, because I am convinced, and I was like, yes, this makes so much sense. And like the way maybe we can talk about this after, because I want to talk about it so freely, but it's so nuanced and like I can only say beautiful and like well said. Like it's a very well presented argument, I would say. Like
Thank you.
You saying that actually tracks, because like you lay it all out, like it all is there, and like
yeah.
I didn't even think about it as your opinion, but that tracks. But because it makes so much
it's
sense.
My thesis. Temptation of the Force is my thesis on attachments.
There you go. I will get. Here's a doctorate. You can. You have a.
Yeah. Thank you.
You have your PhD in Star Wars Jedi love. As we wrap up, what has being a part of the High Republic initiative meant to you as a fan, as an author? Like, what does it all mean to you?
It is like just overwhelmingly incredible and positive. When I was first invited in, which is a nice way of saying Justina bullied me into coming and write a book with her. But when I was first joining up, a lot of people who are involved warned me immediately about a lot of the hard things. And it was, stuff you would expect, like it's hard to be a marginalized person on the internet. And there are a lot of parts of the greater Star Wars fan community that are very hostile to a lot of things. So, stuff like that. And the schedule is really, really tight. You have to write so fast. But to be honest, I haven't experienced anything bad. It's been just overwhelmingly positive. The readers and the fans of the High Republic are the most enthusiastic and kind and fun and funny people that I've interacted with as an author. It's absolutely fantastic. And then on a really personal level, I've been a Star Wars fan for as long as I can remember. It was in my life before I had memories because my parents were huge fans. And my, about to get real, my mom was one of the biggest Star Wars fans I've ever met still to date. And she died about a year and a half before I was invited into, maybe it was 2 years. And I was very nervous to do this when I was never going to be able to share it with my mom. Which of course isn't a reason not to do it. She would have just been like, why are you worried about? This is great. Obviously you have to do this. Star Wars is the best. But being able to delve into not just the fun, banter and cool Star Wars stuff, but actually being able to write a book like Temptation in particular, where I get to tell a story that I know my mom would have absolutely loved. She would have been like, yes, this is what I want from a Star Wars book. So that, it just, I absolutely cherish this, the opportunities that I've had. And it's been really just almost kind of like life-changing in how I think about some of the ways that I write.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Wow. Yeah. I love it. I love getting real, and that it totally makes sense. Star Wars means so much to so many different people for different reasons. And I think that taking that, I don't even know where I'm going with it, but like connecting it so personally to who you are in your own experience just makes it more personal for everyone reading it. Like I can feel that in the book, like definitely feel that. Well, as we wrap up, are there any cons or events that fans can see you at the remainder of 2024?
Hopefully I'll be at San Diego Comic-Con. But other than that, I don't know.
Okay.
I am not able to plan that far in advance when it comes to Star Wars. You never know what's going to happen.
Sure.
But hopefully San Diego, which is
great.
Like less than 2 months from now.
Yes. Hopefully we'll run into each other again there. I'm planning on being there as well. Anything outside of Star Wars? Any other things that you have on your plate that are not Star Wars related that you feel like fans might vibe with or enjoy?
I am thrilled to announce that Temptation of the Force is my last book that's coming out in 2024.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've had 3 already. I get to relax a little bit with like book launches and events and just focus on what I'm writing, which is very nice for me. I do have a newsletter that I send out pretty regularly with, of course, like updates. If I am going to be places, the best way to find out about it is my newsletter or Instagram. But I also write a lot of essays and things like that about like writing and about life and stuff. So that is the Instagram and then my newsletter are the best places to find me.
Excellent. Well, Tessa, I cannot thank you enough for being here today. Temptation of the Force is a triumph. It is out everywhere right now. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you could have me.
It is always a good time to chat with a Star Wars author, and Tessa was so nice, and I cannot thank her and my friends at Random House Worlds enough for helping make this interview happen. Now, it wouldn't be a This Dad Reads episode if I didn't discuss my last current next. So I know I'm doing it at a little bit different part of the episode than usual, but full disclosure, guys, I didn't get as much read as I was planning on in the last month, so I'm not counting that as a fail. It just is what it is. My life was really busy, so let's just dive right in. The last books that I read were Temptation of the Force by Tessa Gratton, which I've talked about at length already. And then I did get to Extinction by Douglas Preston, which was that Jurassic Park's vibey kind of book. It ended up not being like Jurassic Park at all, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It was a thriller that had some crazy twists and turns and really had me on my toes. I didn't want to put it down. Actually, probably about a quarter of the way in, I was fully in, and I love a good thriller just because it keeps you on your toes and it's definitely entertaining. So my full review of that will be on This Dad Reads very shortly, and I want to thank my friends at Tor Publishing Group for sending me that book for review. Definitely recommend it if you're looking for a great summertime thriller. I'm currently reading The Tide Over the Horizon by J.P. Baker. This author had emailed me and asked if I was interested in reading his novel, and I said that I would, and I had time in my review schedule, so I'm doing that right now. I don't know a ton about it yet, but I'm going to read its description from Goodreads to share a little bit more about it. Tetra always dreamed of adventure, but when the sea swept her away, the adventure she had once dreamed about soon became a nightmare. So again, I don't know that much about this book yet. I'm literally a couple chapters in, so stay tuned on a future episode to hear my full thoughts. And so, a repeat from last month's episode is Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty. I'm gonna give that one a shot. Once again, looks like a dark fantasy book that I'm still very excited to dive into. So hopefully by the time I record my next episode, I will have some others that I wasn't planning on reading, but we'll just have to find out together. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Tessa Gratton, for joining me today. And again, Temptation of the Force is out everywhere today, so definitely check it out and let me know what you think of it. So until we meet again, friends, take us out, Casey. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at thisdadreads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads, the podcast, is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.